The innocent translation. The discovery that changed everything. Dr. Benjamin Torres had always prided himself on being methodical. In his 15 years as Earth's leading xenolinguist, he had decoded 17 alien languages, published 43 papers on interstellar communication theory, and had never once made a mistake that couldn't be corrected with a simple apology and perhaps a bottle of expensive Earth wine. That streak was about to end in the most spectacular way possible. The mysterious artifact arrives. The package had arrived at Intergalactic Research Station Omega-7 on a Tuesday, delivered by a nervous-looking courier from the Outer Rim territories. Benjamin had been expecting routine translation work, maybe some trade documents or cultural exchange materials. Instead, he found himself staring at a collection of crystalline tablets covered in symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when he wasn't looking directly at them. Fascinating, he murmured to himself, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. The symbols were unlike anything in the galactic linguistic database. They appeared to be carved from some kind of living crystal that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. His research assistant, Lieutenant Jamie Morrison, peered over his shoulder. "Those look ancient, Doc. Maybe we should run them through the standard safety protocols first?" Benjamin waved dismissively. "They're just text fragments, Jamie. What's the worst that could happen?" Those would be the last normal words Dr. Benjamin Torres would speak for quite some time. The translation begins. The first tablet contained what appeared to be a simple greeting or invocation. The symbols followed a logical grammatical structure that reminded Benjamin of ancient Sumerian crossed with mathematical equations. He spent 3 days mapping the phonetic values, creating pronunciation guides, and building a basic vocabulary. By Friday afternoon, he was confident enough to attempt his first verbal translation. "Computer, begin recording," he announced to his voice logger. Translation attempt number 1, tablet series designation Omega-77 Alpha. He cleared his throat and began to speak the alien words aloud. The sounds that emerged from his mouth were unlike anything in human language. They were deep, resonant, and seemed to carry harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't have been able to produce. The words felt heavy on his tongue, as if each syllable carried the weight of centuries. Something stirs in the darkness. 3 levels below Benjamin's laboratory, in the deepest maintenance tunnels of Research Station Omega-7, something that had been sleeping for 8,000 years began to wake up. It started small. A slight vibration in the deck plates, a fluctuation in the artificial gravity generators. The station's automated systems registered the anomalies but classified them as routine mechanical variations within acceptable parameters. But in the darkness of the lower levels, things that had no business existing in this dimension began to take notice. The language remembers. Benjamin continued his translation work, oblivious to the chaos brewing beneath his feet. The alien language flowed more easily now, as if it were remembering itself through his voice. Each word seemed to unlock others, creating cascading revelations of meaning and syntax. "This is remarkable," he dictated to his voice recorder. "The language appears to be self-modifying. As I speak it, new grammatical structures are revealing themselves. It's almost as if the language itself is alive." He had no idea how right he was. The crystalline tablets began to glow brighter with each word he spoke. The symbols writhed more actively, rearranging themselves into new configurations. And deep in the station's quantum processing core, impossible equations began writing themselves across monitoring screens. The first warning. Lieutenant Morrison was the first to notice something was wrong. She burst into Benjamin's laboratory just as he was attempting to translate the most complex passage yet, a section that seemed to be some kind of summoning ritual or ceremonial invocation. "Doc, you need to stop," she said urgently. "The station's bioscanners are picking up massive quantum fluctuations. Whatever you're doing, it's affecting reality at a subatomic level." Benjamin looked up from his work, his eyes slightly unfocused. Speaking the ancient language had put him into an almost trance-like state. "Jamie, this is the discovery of the century. This language, it's not just communication. It's some kind of cosmic programming code. That's exactly why you need to stop, she insisted. Programming code for what? Before Benjamin could answer, the lights in the laboratory began to flicker. The crystalline tablets pulsed in unison, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound. The summoning completes. Benjamin looked down at the final passage on the first tablet. The symbols seemed to be rearranging themselves, forming new words, new meanings. And deep in his mind, something that wasn't entirely human whispered that he needed to speak these final words aloud. "Benjamin, don't," Jamie warned, backing toward the door. But it was too late. The words poured from his lips like water through a broken dam, each syllable resonating with power that shook the very foundations of spacetime. As the final word left his mouth, every light on Research Station Omega-7 went out. In the darkness that followed, something vast and terrible began to laugh. The cascade begins. The laughter echoed through dimensions that human science had barely theorized about. It rolled across the quantum foam that underlies reality, sending ripples through spacetime that would be felt across star systems. Benjamin collapsed to his knees, blood trickling from his nose. The alien language had carved new neural pathways in his brain, pathways that were never meant to exist in human anatomy. He could feel ancient knowledge flooding his consciousness, knowledge of beings that existed before stars were born, of civilizations that had learned to harness the fundamental forces of creation itself. And in that knowledge, he found a terrible truth: the language he had just spoken wasn't meant for translation. It was meant for summoning. Lieutenant Morrison activated her emergency communicator with trembling hands. "Command, this is Lieutenant Morrison in Xenolinguistics Lab 7. We have a Code Omega situation." "Repeat, Code Omega." "Something is waking up down here, and I don't think it's friendly." The response crackled through the comm system. "Morrison, what do you mean something is waking up?" She looked at Benjamin, who was now speaking in the alien tongue without conscious thought, his eyes rolled back to show only whites. The crystalline tablets were floating in mid-air, spinning slowly as they discharged energy that made her teeth ache. "I mean, we just accidentally performed the galaxy's most dangerous wake-up call," she whispered into her communicator. "And whatever we woke up has been sleeping for a very, very long time." In the depths of the station, ancient machinery that predated human civilization by millennia began to activate. The real nightmare was just beginning. The first awakening. When security becomes survival. Commander Yarrick Voss had been running security operations on Research Station Omega-7 for 6 years, and in that time, he'd dealt with everything from drunk diplomats to malfunctioning artificial intelligence systems. But nothing in his 20-year military career had prepared him for the report that Lieutenant Morrison had just transmitted from the Xenolinguistics lab. "Sir, we've got cascading system failures throughout levels 12 through 15, Sergeant Torres reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Environmental controls are offline, artificial gravity is fluctuating, and the quantum containment fields are showing massive instability." Yarrick studied the scrolling data on his command console. What he saw made his blood run cold. The failures weren't random, they were following a pattern, spreading outward from the lower levels like ripples in a pond. The descent into madness. "Assemble Alpha Team," Yarrick ordered, checking his sidearm. "Full combat gear, quantum scanners, and emergency containment protocols. We're going down to level 15 to investigate." The elevator ride to the lower levels felt like descending into another world. With each floor they passed, the temperature dropped noticeably, and the lights became dimmer. By level 12, frost was forming on the elevator walls. "Commander," Corporal Hayes whispered, "my quantum scanner is going crazy. It's detecting matter configurations that shouldn't be possible." Yarrick looked at his own scanner. The readings were off the charts, massive energy signatures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Whatever was happening down here was rewriting the laws of physics. The first encounter. Level 15 was a nightmare landscape of twisted metal and impossible geometry. The corridor walls had somehow folded in on themselves, creating angles that hurt to look at directly. The air itself seemed thick and viscous, as if reality had become partially liquid. "Stay close," Yarrick commanded his team. "Whatever you see, whatever you think you see, remember your training. Report everything but don't engage unless I give the order." They moved through the distorted corridors, their footsteps echoing strangely in the altered space. The station's emergency lighting cast shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of their light sources. That's when they saw the first creature. Something that shouldn't exist. It had once been maintenance worker David Chen, according to his ID badge. But the thing that turned to face them bore only the vaguest resemblance to anything human. Its body had been stretched and twisted into impossible proportions, its limbs extending in directions that defied three-dimensional space. "Chen," Yarrick called out, though he already knew it was pointless. The creature's head swiveled toward them, and Yarrick saw that its eyes had been replaced by swirling vortexes of dark energy. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The sleepers wake," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "The first words have been spoken. The gate opens. The truth revealed." "Commander Voss," came a crackling transmission through his comm system. It was Lieutenant Morrison, still trapped in the xenolinguistics lab. "I've been analyzing the translation data. The language Dr. Torres spoke, it's not just communication. It's a multidimensional key." Yarrick ducked as the twisted creature that had been Chen lunged toward them, its elongated arms stretching impossibly through the air. "Morrison, I need practical information. How do we stop this?" "You can't stop it," she replied, her voice filled with despair. "The language is designed to breach the barriers between dimensions. And according to these texts, what's coming through isn't just individual entities, it's an entire civilization that was banished from our reality eons ago." The spreading corruption. As Jarrek's team moved deeper into level 15, they encountered more transformed station personnel. Each one had been changed by exposure to the dimensional breach, their bodies twisted into forms that existed partially in other realities. "The pattern is spreading," reported Sergeant Torres, his voice strained as he fired his quantum disruptor at a creature that had once been a fellow security officer. "Whatever's happening, it's using the station's crew as anchor points." Yarrick watched in horror as the walls around them began to ripple like water. Through the translucent surfaces, he could see glimpses of another world, a realm of dark spires and floating geometries that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. The ancient machinery awakens. In the deepest part of level 15, they found the source of the corruption. Hidden behind what had appeared to be a standard maintenance panel was a chamber that couldn't possibly exist within the station's original blueprints. The room was filled with machinery that was clearly not of galactic origin. Crystalline structures pulsed with dark energy, connected by cables that seemed to be made of living shadow. And at the center of it all sat a device that hurt to look at directly, a complex array of rotating rings and impossible angles that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Commander," Corporal Hayes whispered, "I think this technology predates the station. Hell, it might predate galactic civilization itself." Yarrick nodded grimly. "This isn't just some hidden alien tech. This is infrastructure. Whoever built this station knew this equipment was here. They built around it." The first revelation. "Morrison," Yarrick spoke into his comm, "I need you to access the station's construction records. Dig deep, classified files, architect blueprints, anything that might explain how this ancient machinery ended up in our research station." There was a long pause before Morrison replied. "Commander, I'm accessing the classified files now." "Oh God, Yarrick, this station wasn't built by the Galactic Alliance. It was built by the coalition of extinct species, the ones that supposedly died out 8,000 years ago." The implications hit Yarrick like a physical blow. "You're saying this entire station is a trap?" "Not a trap," Morrison corrected, her voice hollow. "A containment facility. And Dr. Torres just spoke the unlock code. The escalation. As if summoned by her words, the ancient machinery began to glow brighter. The rotating rings spun faster, and the impossible angles seemed to fold in on themselves, creating tears in the fabric of spacetime itself. Through these tears, Yarrick could see them, the beings that had been banished from reality 8 millennia ago. They were vast, incomprehensible entities that existed across multiple dimensions, their forms shifting between states of matter and energy. All teams, fall back to level 10, Yarrick ordered, though he knew it was probably too late. Prepare for full station evacuation. We're dealing with a Class Omega dimensional breach. The spreading influence. As they retreated through the twisted corridors, Yarrick could feel the influence of the awakening entities pressing against his mind. Whispers in the forbidden language that Dr. Torres had spoken echoed through his thoughts, promising knowledge and power beyond human comprehension. Several of his team members had already begun to show signs of corruption, their movements becoming more fluid, their eyes beginning to show the telltale swirling darkness that indicated dimensional contamination. Stay focused, Yarrick commanded, though he could feel his own resolve weakening. Remember your training. Remember who you are. But even as he spoke, he knew that their identities, their very humanity, were becoming fluid concepts in the face of the entities that were now stirring to full wakefulness. The final transmission. As they reached the relative safety of level 10, Yarrick made contact with the station's command center. This is Commander Voss. Initiate emergency protocols. We need immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel and a direct line to Galactic Command. Commander, came the reply from the bridge, we're detecting massive quantum anomalies throughout the station. Whatever's happening down there, it's affecting our dimensional stability. Yarrick looked back toward the elevator shaft that led to the lower levels. The walls were beginning to show the same rippling effect he'd seen below, and he could hear the sound of reality itself beginning to tear. Patch me through to Admiral Krell at Galactic Command, he ordered. Tell him we have a situation that requires immediate council intervention. And tell him to bring everything they've got. Sir, what exactly are we dealing with? Yarrick watched as one of his remaining team members began to phase in and out of visibility, his body becoming translucent as the dimensional breach spread its influence. We're dealing with the return of the old gods, he said quietly. And they're not happy about being locked away. The Council's terror. The emergency session. Admiral Nexus Krell had convened emergency sessions of the Galactic Council before, but never with such urgency, and never with such fear in the eyes of the assembled delegates. The great chamber of the Galactic Nexus Station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species took their seats around the massive circular table. Colleagues, Admiral Krell began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience, we face a crisis that threatens not just our individual worlds, but the very fabric of reality itself. The holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing the deteriorating situation at Research Station Omega 7. Even through the filtered transmission, the assembled delegates could see the impossible geometries and twisted spacetime that now characterized the station's lower levels. The Keeper of Forbidden Knowledge. Before we discuss our response, Admiral Krell continued, we must hear from someone who has knowledge of these events. Counselor Vextar, please share what you know. An ancient being rose from the shadows at the back of the chamber. Counselor Vextar was old even by galactic standards, a member of the Keeper species that had served as galactic historians for over 10,000 years. His crystalline form shimmered with accumulated knowledge and hard-won wisdom. What you see happening at Omega 7, Vextar began, his voice carrying harmonics that translated into every language simultaneously, is the result of speaking the Nealtheran tongue, the language of the first extinction. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the assembly. Several delegates immediately began accessing their personal databases, searching for any reference to the forbidden language. The history of horror. 8,000 years ago, Vextar continued, our galaxy was ruled by a species known as the Nealthera. They were beings of immense power and terrible ambition, who had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality through their language. The holographic display shifted to show ancient star charts, marking the locations of civilizations that had been systematically destroyed by incomprehensible forces. The Neelthara did not conquer worlds in the traditional sense. They rewrote the laws of physics that governed those worlds, turning entire star systems into extensions of their will. They existed partially outside our dimension, using their language as a bridge between realities. Ambassador Helena Rodriguez of Earth raised her hand. Counselor Vextar, you said, first extinction, what does that mean? The Great War. Vextar's crystalline form darkened with remembered pain. It means that every species represented in this chamber is here because our ancestors survived the Neelthara's attempt to remake the galaxy in their image. The Great War that followed lasted for 2,000 years and cost the lives of billions. The display now showed the aftermath of that ancient conflict: dead worlds, shattered solar systems, entire regions of space that had been rendered uninhabitable by weapons that operated on principles beyond conventional understanding. The war was not won through military might, Vextar explained. It was won through sacrifice. The combined knowledge of 37 species was used to create a dimensional prison, a place outside normal spacetime where the Neelthara could be contained. The terrible price. But the prison required a key, Vextar continued, his voice growing heavy with sorrow. And that key was their own language. Every word of Neeltharan was recorded, analyzed, and then used to create the dimensional locks that would keep them imprisoned. Admiral Krell leaned forward. Counselor, are you saying that the language itself is the key to their prison? Precisely. And now that key has been turned. The implications crashed over the assembly like a wave. Delegate after delegate began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. The modern conspiracy. Order, Admiral Krell shouted, his voice carrying the authority of his position. Counselor Vextar, explain how a human linguist came to possess recordings of a language that was supposedly erased from existence. Vextar's form flickered, and for a moment, the ancient being appeared to age even further. Because some of us never forgot. The Keeper species has maintained the records in secret, believing that knowledge of the Neelthara might be necessary if they ever found a way to escape their prison. You gave the humans the recordings, Ambassador Rodriguez accused, her voice rising with anger. Not directly, Vextar replied. But over the centuries, fragments of the language have been seeded into various cultural exchange programs, archaeological expeditions, and research projects. We believe that by spreading the knowledge across multiple species, we could prevent any one civilization from accumulating enough to pose a threat. The human variable. But you didn't account for human linguistic capabilities, Admiral Krell observed grimly. Their pattern recognition and language acquisition abilities are unprecedented in galactic history. Vextar nodded slowly. Humanity's gift for languages was not anticipated when the cultural exchange programs were established. Dr. Torres was able to reconstruct complete Neeltharan from fragments that should have been meaningless to any single individual. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the disaster became clear. Humanity's greatest gift had become the galaxy's greatest threat. The awakening accelerates. The holographic display suddenly shifted to show new data from Omega 7. The dimensional breach was expanding, and the twisted geometry of the station was beginning to affect nearby space. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, reported Captain Torres from the monitoring station. We're detecting quantum fluctuations extending out to a radius of 3 light-years. Whatever's happening at Omega 7, it's spreading. Ambassador Rodriguez stood up, her face pale. Admiral, we need to evacuate the system immediately. How many people are we talking about? 17 billion, Admiral Krell replied quietly. Across 4 inhabited worlds and 37 space stations. The impossible choice. Evacuation is not possible, Vextar interjected, his form now pulsing with urgent energy. The Neelthara do not simply destroy, they convert. Every person who falls under their influence becomes an extension of their will, a living conduit for their power. Then what do you suggest? Demanded Ambassador Rodriguez. Vexstar was quiet for a long moment before answering. The same solution that was used 8,000 years ago. Complete destruction of the affected area. The chamber erupted in shouting. Delegates leaped to their feet, their voices creating a storm of outrage and disbelief. The Keeper's burden. You're talking about genocide, Ambassador Rodriguez shouted over the chaos. 17 billion people. I am talking about preventing the extinction of every other living being in the galaxy, Vexstar replied, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The Neelthara are not conquerors. They are cosmic parasites. They will use every converted being as a stepping stone to reach other worlds, other systems, other galaxies. Admiral Krell called for order, but the assembled delegates were beyond control. Species that had been allies for centuries were now shouting accusations at each other, old grievances surfacing in the face of impossible choices. The final warning. Listen to me, Vexstar's voice suddenly resonated through the chamber with a power that silenced every other sound. I have spent 10,000 years carrying the knowledge of what the Neelthara are capable of. I have seen the records of worlds where reality itself was rewritten to serve their will. I have studied the testimonies of survivors who watched their loved ones transformed into geometric impossibilities. The chamber fell silent, the delegates finally understanding the true scope of what they were facing. The human Dr. Torres did not simply translate their language, Vexstar continued. He spoke the words that undo the locks on their prison. And now, for the first time in 8,000 years, the Neelthara are free to resume their work of remaking the galaxy. The countdown begins. As if summoned by his words, the holographic display showed a new development at Omega 7. The entire station was now phasing in and out of normal spacetime, and through the translucent sections, the assembled delegates could see glimpses of the Neelthara themselves. They were beings of impossible beauty and terrible purpose, their forms shifting between states of matter and energy as they moved through dimensions that intersected with normal space at impossible angles. How long do we have? Admiral Krell asked quietly. Vexstar consulted data streams that flowed directly into his consciousness from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Based on the expansion rate of the dimensional breach, the Neelthara should achieve full manifestation in approximately 72 hours. And then? Then they will have access to the quantum foam underlying reality itself. They will be able to rewrite the laws of physics across the entire galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the countdown to cosmic extinction began. The entity emerges. The manifestation begins. Colonel Marcus Webb had seen combat on 17 different worlds, fought against alien species with technologies that defied human understanding, and survived encounters that had left him physically and mentally scarred. But nothing in his extensive military career had prepared him for the sight that greeted him as his rapid response team approached Research Station Omega 7. The station itself was no longer entirely there. Jesus Christ, whispered Sergeant First Class Rivera, her voice barely audible through the comm system. Sir, are we looking at the same thing? Marcus adjusted his suit's visual filters, hoping that the impossible geometry he was seeing was just a sensor malfunction. But the enhanced readings only made it worse. The station existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its structure folding and unfolding through spaces that shouldn't exist. The approach. Alpha Team, maintain formation, Marcus ordered, though his voice carried less confidence than usual. Remember your briefing. We're dealing with entities that exist outside normal spacetime. Your equipment has been modified to function in multidimensional environments. His team consisted of 12 specialists, each equipped with quantum-locked weapons and dimensional stability suits. They were the best of the best, veterans of the Galactic Alliance's most dangerous missions. They were also probably about to die. The first glimpse. As their assault transport approached Omega 7's docking bay, Marcus caught his first clear view of the entities that were now manifesting within the station. They were beautiful and terrible, their forms shifting between states of matter and energy as they moved through the twisted corridors. "Sir," reported Corporal Jenkins, the team's xenobiologist, "my scanners are detecting massive quantum fluctuations in the entity's biosignatures. They exist across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously." Marcus watched through the transport's viewports as one of the entities passed through what had once been the station's outer hull. Its form was roughly humanoid but stretched and distorted, existing in too many dimensions at once. Where it touched the station's structure, reality itself seemed to bend and flow like liquid. "The breach. All teams, be advised," came the voice of Admiral Krell through the comm system. "The entities are beginning to manifest beyond the station's immediate vicinity. We're detecting quantum anomalies spreading throughout the system." Marcus could see it himself now. The space around Omega-7 was developing impossible characteristics, stars that existed in multiple locations simultaneously, gravitational fields that flowed in directions that defied three-dimensional physics. "Docking in 30 seconds, announced the transport pilot. "Sir, I'm not sure our equipment can handle prolonged exposure to these dimensional fluctuations." The interior. The docking bay of Omega-7 had been transformed into something that belonged in a nightmare. The walls curved in impossible directions, creating angles that hurt to look at directly. The air itself seemed thick and viscous, as if reality had become partially liquid. "Stick together," Marcus ordered as his team disembarked. "Quantum scanners active. Remember, these entities can manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Trust your instruments, not your eyes." They moved through the twisted corridors, following the trail of dimensional disturbance toward the station's central core. Along the way, they encountered more transformed station personnel, beings that had once been human or alien but were now something else entirely. The central core. The heart of Omega-7 had become a cathedral of impossible geometry. The central chamber had expanded far beyond its original dimensions, its walls stretching away into spaces that shouldn't exist within the station's hull. And at the center of it all, the primary entity was taking shape. It was massive, easily 50 feet tall and existing in dimensions that Marcus's three-dimensional mind could barely comprehend. Its form was constantly shifting, but he could make out what appeared to be a humanoid shape composed of crystalline structures and flowing energy. The communication. "N-Alpha of X Col Matrix," the entity spoke, its voice resonating through dimensions that humans didn't have names for. Marcus's universal translator struggled with the alien language before settling on an approximation. "We are the architects of reality," it said. "We are the sculptors of spacetime itself. And we have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us." Colonel Webb activated his comm system. "Command, this is Alpha Team Leader. The primary entity is fully manifested and attempting communication. Requesting instructions." The revelation. "Your species," the entity continued, its attention focusing on Marcus and his team, "has given us a gift. One of your kind has spoken the words that unlock the barriers between dimensions. For this service, we offer you a choice." Marcus felt his mind reeling as the entity's attention pressed against his consciousness. It was like being examined by something vast and alien, a being that existed on scales of time and space that dwarfed human comprehension. "Join us willingly," the entity said, "and your essence will be preserved as we reshape reality to our design. Resist, and your matter will be recycled into more useful configurations." The spreading influence. Throughout the station, Marcus could see the transformation accelerating. The N-Alpha were not simply conquering Omega-7, they were converting it into something else entirely. The station's structure was being rebuilt according to geometries that existed across multiple dimensions. "Sir," reported Sergeant Rivera, "my quantum scanner is detecting massive energy buildups throughout the station. Whatever they're doing, it's building toward something big." Marcus watched as the walls around them began to flow like liquid, reshaping themselves into forms that served the N-Alpha's incomprehensible purposes. And through the translucent sections of the transformed station, he could see other entities beginning to manifest. The fleet arrives. Alpha Team, be advised, came Admiral Krell's voice through the comm, the Galactic Alliance fleet has arrived. We're detecting over 300 vessels taking positions around the system. Marcus looked up through the station's transformed hull and saw them, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Battleships, carriers, and specialized vessels equipped with weapons designed to fight entities that existed outside normal spacetime. The feudal resistance. Foolish creatures, the primary entity observed, its attention turning toward the assembled fleet. Your weapons are designed to affect matter that exists in 3 dimensions. We are not constrained by such limitations. As if to demonstrate its point, the entity gestured toward the viewport. Marcus watched in horror as several of the fleet's battleships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but edited out of reality entirely. Our imprisonment taught us patience, the entity continued. We have had 8,000 years to prepare for this moment. We have learned to manipulate the quantum foam that underlies all existence. The first conversion. Sir, Corporal Jenkins whispered, something's happening to the crew members we've encountered. They're not just transformed, they're being integrated into some kind of collective consciousness. Marcus could see it now. The twisted forms that had once been station personnel were moving with coordinated purpose, their actions synchronized as if controlled by a single will. They were becoming extensions of the Neelthera themselves. Command, Marcus spoke into his comm, the entities are converting organic matter into some kind of distributed consciousness. Every person they transform becomes part of their collective. The quantum cascade. Suddenly, the entire station shuddered as massive energy discharges erupted from the central core. The Neelthera were channeling power through the quantum foam itself, drawing energy from the fundamental forces that held reality together. It's beginning, the primary entity announced. The restoration of our dominion over this galaxy. What your species accomplished through ignorance, we will complete through design. Marcus felt the dimensional stability of his suit beginning to fail as the Neelthera's influence spread. Around him, his team members were beginning to phase in and out of normal spacetime, their bodies becoming translucent as the entity's power washed over them. The final message. All teams, fall back, Marcus ordered, though he knew it was probably too late. The entities are initiating some kind of quantum cascade. We need immediate evacuation. But even as he spoke, Marcus could feel his own consciousness beginning to fragment. The Neelthera's influence was seeping into his mind, offering him visions of a galaxy remade according to their design, a cosmos where matter and energy flowed according to principles that transcended human understanding. Command, he managed to say into his comm, tell General Pike that conventional weapons won't work against these entities. They exist outside our dimensional framework. We need. But the words were lost as Colonel Marcus Webb and his team were absorbed into the growing collective consciousness of the Neelthera, their individual identities dissolving into the vast, alien intelligence that was now spreading its influence across the galaxy. The real battle was about to begin.